Hi there everybody, and welcome to the GI Racing 2 channel here at the Game Institute. I'm Gary Simmons, the developer of GI Racing, and in this video I'm going to discuss how to get started exploring and using the GI Racing 2 project to help you build your own racing games. First though, let me just say that at the time of recording this video, GI Racing 2 is still in development and has actually just been launched as a Steam Early Access product. As we develop the product over the coming months, we will be deploying newer versions of the project up on the site for you guys to download. However, I should just draw your attention to the fact that there may be times where, for logistical reasons, the version of the project you guys get here at the Game Institute lags behind slightly the version that is currently deployed on Steam. Now, because GI Racing 2 is still being developed, and therefore is still in a state of flux, we're not really in a position at the moment to record any dedicated or detailed educational material specifically for the GI Racing 2 project. There is just too much at the moment that is likely to change and would invalidate such videos. Therefore, for the time being, I am going to be releasing some short development videos drawing your attention to the new features of the toolset and how they differ from those covered in detail in the GI Racing 1 video training series. It's important to understand that GI Racing 2 is really just an upgrade of GI Racing 1, and while the changes are significant under the hood, from a toolset perspective, very little has changed. Mainly, just new features have been added to the toolset. Therefore, we have many hours of video training in the GI Racing 1 channel here at the Game Institute, which is almost fully applicable to using the GI Racing 2 toolset as well. And we're going to take a look at where those videos are in a moment and what they discuss. But the videos I record here in this channel, at least for the time being, will assume that you have gone through all of the training videos in the GI Racing 1 channel and fully understand the tool set that I have provided you with, so that you know how to bring in your own tracks and your own cars, how to set up your AI data and your cinematic camera sequences, and how they integrate into the overall game. It is also important to understand that GI Racing 2 is targeted at seasoned Unity developers who have already been through some of our more beginner style training. These videos will be a technical overview of some of the features added and how we accomplished them, of the new features exposed in the GI Racing toolset, and some discussion around the changes that we had to make migrating the project from a Unity 3/4 project up to a Unity 5 project. So, if you have just arrived here at the Game Institute and know nothing about GI Racing, then let's see first how you get that project on your computer and some of the other features here on the GI Racing 2 page. So I've just logged in to the Game Institute website. I'm now staring at my dashboard, and if I scroll down to the GI Racing 2 channel, here it is here, and click on that, I'm going to find myself at the GI Racing 2 welcome page, where we see this nice image of GI Racing 2 advertising that it's available on Steam, and also we show here the GI Racing 2 Steam promotional video, at least the one that shows the gameplay. But what we want to do is get our hands on the actual project source code and all of the assets that it contains, and we do that from within the GI Racing 2 page, clicking the resources link from the GI Racing 2 page's left hand navbar, like so. And you'll see there's actually a couple of things that are on this page. At the very top you can see a link here to GI Racing 2 Unity 5 studentbuild.zip. If you click on that, you'll download the complete project that you see here on the screen in front of me. Going back to the GI Racing 2 page, assuming you've clicked on that link and you're downloading it, there's also some other things of interest here. You'll notice there's a dialog box here that allows you to input your GI username and password, and you will get a free Steam key. That will allow you to go onto the Steam website or through the Steam client and download completely free of charge the commercial build of GI Racing 2 in early access. So go and get your free copy of the commercial build of the game. You scroll down a little bit more, you can see we've actually embedded our Steam community page inside our Game Institute GI Racing 2 welcome page as well. And this is where you can see all of the comments and screenshots and the latest news about the GI Racing 2 Steam build. Now, Now, we really want your help to make GI Racing 2 popular and give the product longevity, because we're relying on our Steam sales to essentially fund the project and fund the development of future training videos. So please do click on reviews and give us a positive review that will really help GI Racing 2 get traction in the Steam community. That would be very much appreciated. And scrolling down again, you can also see we've got the GI Racing 2 user manual here, which is just the manual to the actual commercial game. Shows you how to configure your controllers, how to play the game, what all the different game modes are, what all the different graphical options are. But like I said, the thing that we're really interested in for now is getting that Unity project downloaded onto our desktop, and here is the link that will do that. So download it onto your desktop, unzip it, and then open it up in Unity. Before we go back to the project though, I do want to draw your attention to the GI Racing 1 channel here at the Game Institute. So if I go back to my dashboard, you'll see here it is with the older style graphics, because GI Racing 1 has a lot of material that is still extremely relevant to GI Racing 2. Mainly, it has a series of videos, many hours of content in fact, showing you how to use the GI Racing toolset. So if I click on that, that's going to show me a list of videos here. The top video here is called Introduction to Racing Games. Very important you watch this 1 hour long video if you're intending to search through the source code and understand how the AI works in GI Racing. This is a high level overview of the complete AI system that we implement. It describes how the cars that are controlled by the AI drive around the track, how they avoid the player, and how they know at what speed to take their corners. So very important video to watch, and it's also applicable really to just AI in general in racing games. Underneath that you can see we have Car Physics Part 1. This is a pretty long in-depth video which teaches just generic car physics, and more specifically the exact physics that we use in GI Racing 1 and 2. So go and check that out if you intend to explore the car scripts that are attached to each of our cars that control the physical forces that are acting upon the car. In fact, you can see underneath the Car Physics Part 1 we also have 3 other videos dedicated to car physics. These are actually code walkthroughs where we walk through the car script itself, really pointing out how that code works and how all the various forces and drag are applied to the car. Now of course in GI Racing 2 we've made some changes to the car script, but they're pretty slight really, and mostly they're just additions. So most of the stuff that you learn in these videos is going to apply to the source code in GI Racing 2. Mostly the systems and the code have stayed intact. It's really just numbers that have been tweaked, because in Unity 5 Unity Technologies upgraded the version of PhysX, and that meant that all of the physics numbers that we were using before for our wheel friction curves completely changed. In the earlier versions of GI Racing, the wheel friction curves were defined as wheel forces, whereas in the newer version of PhysX they use wheel slip ratios. So it really just meant bringing the values down for the most part into the 0 to 1 range. If you intend to understand how the car physics work, these 4 videos here will fully explain to you how information is gathered from a controller, such as an Xbox 360 controller, which provides the car script with axes values in the -1 to +1 range for the throttle and steering, and how those values alone are used to generate the physical forces that move the car around the track. Now underneath the physics and the AI discussions we have videos that are quite important if you intend to bring in your own cars and tracks into GI Racing, because the remainder of the videos in this series show you how to use the GI Racing toolset to bring in your own tracks and cars and set up your own AI data. And this toolset is virtually unchanged in GI Racing 2. Like I said just now, we've added new features to the toolset, but everything that you learn here is going to pretty much carry over. So in the track import and configuration video, we show you how to bring in your own models into the project and how to set them up so that they're ready to be used as tracks in the GI Racing game. Underneath that we have the driver AI video. This is going to show you how to lay down, using our track manager tool, all of the nodes that the AI drivers will follow that will tell them which race line they should be on at any given time and the speeds at which they should be taking corners and things like that. Now if you've played GI Racing 2 or 1, and I certainly hope you have at this point, you will no doubt have seen the cinematic camera system that is used on things such as the main menu. We also use the cinematic camera system when watching replays. In the camera system video here, we show you how to set up those camera systems from scratch using our Camera Manager tool. So very important that you watch this too. Following the camera system video is a video that shows you how to set up your tracks so that they can look and play differently at different times of day, different visibility, and in different weather conditions. It's here that you're going to see how to make your track look like it's a rainy day or a foggy night. Of course, bringing in a new track into GI Racing and setting it up as a new scene doesn't necessarily mean that it's part of the game. In the game integration video, we show how to build that new scene that you've imported and set up into all of the various seasons and tournaments and races that become part of the main game flow, and how to make a quick race icon for it so it shows up on the quick race menu and things like that. And finally, in the video labeled applying damage to the car, which is, to be honest, not a particularly good name for that video. This video actually shows you how to bring in your own car models into the GI Racing framework and how to build them into the game. It also describes how to set up all of the various body damage layers so that the car can exhibit damage. And I talk in detail about how the car is damaged, how it's brought in and set up in the game, how we can make it either a player car or an AI car, and how we can also integrate that into the game as well so that it's a car that the player can unlock, for example, or a car that AI drivers can use. You need to watch all of these videos really before carrying on with the videos in this series that I'm developing now. It assumes you have all this prior knowledge. So let's go back to the GI Racing project and assume you've just opened it. Now, you may have opened it on a completely different scene to me. Here I've opened it up on the Long Beach scene, but that doesn't really matter. The first thing we're going to discuss is how you even run the game in the editor, because if I just press play from anywhere in the editor, the game is not going to play like it's supposed to. For example, we know when we download the game from Steam, the first thing that happens when I press play is we see the GI logo and some thunder and lightning that says made in Unity. Then we see the system requirements screen, and then we see the main menu screen where the player gets to create a new profile or choose to participate in a career. But when you press play in the editor, the current scene that you're in is just going to start playing, and that scene is not necessarily going to have all the information that it needs to play the game. So I've pressed play here, and what you can see is when I do that in any of the individual race scenes, all that happens is an AI race starts performing. If you look in the game view, you can see that I'm not driving this car. The cars are just racing around the track by themselves, controlled by the AI. And while that's very cool, of course, that isn't the experience when we first start the game in the built player. And also, of course, what you'll notice is there's no sound. And that's because we need to run the first scene that creates the audio manager, creates the game manager, and then goes on to load those other scenes with everything that they need to carry out their task properly. So in order to run the game in the editor just like it would run in the final build, we need to find what the first scene is that should be executed. Now, in my particular projects, I always use a scene called Bootstrapper for this. And if I load in the Bootstrapper scene, you'll see there's not really an awful lot going on here. It's really just a big quad. But if I press play, you'll see that it's that quad that plays the Game Institute animation. It's actually a movie texture that's been mapped to that quad. But why this is a really important scene is it creates the game manager and the audio manager game objects. And these game objects, unlike the usual Unity game objects, they don't get destroyed when a new scene is loaded. So as soon as they are created in the Bootstrapper scene, the Bootstrapper plays its animation, then it loads in the system requirements screen, which then loads in the main menu screen. But while all of these new scene loads are happening, the game manager and the audio manager persist, and they're used to carry data and important functionality from one scene to the next. So any scene anywhere in the GI Racing project is able to talk to the game manager or talk to the audio manager. And the game manager, like I said, if you watch the GI Racing 1 videos, you'll understand what the game manager does and how we use it to configure all the tracks and the cars and all of the tournaments and races that are in a tournament. And the audio manager contains all of the sounds that are used by the game. Now, of course, the game manager also contains much functionality for loading scenes and for querying the current qualification times of AI drivers, but that's not really important right now. All that's important is that this is the scene that needs to be loaded and executed if you wish the game to play out as it would the final build. Now, of course, if you're ever given a project like this and you don't know what the first scene is that should be executed, one way that you can do that is just go to the File menu, bring up the build settings. Now, you can see all of the scenes that are currently used in GI Racing 2 are added to the build list. The order in which they're added to the build list doesn't really matter, all except, of course, the very first scene in the build list, because this is the first scene that Unity will execute when it runs your game. So we can see here, just by calling up the build list, that the bootstrapper scene is the scene that we need to run if we wish the game to execute much like it would in the final build. And you can see if I press play here, you can see the game manager and the audio manager are created because they're objects that have been placed in this scene. But you can see that when this scene is over and the system requirements scene loads, you'll see that the game manager and the audio managers persist in the game hierarchy. So there you go, we're now in the system requirement screen. The game manager and the audio manager persist, and then after this system requirement screen is complete, the main menu will be loaded, and you can see if I scroll to the bottom of the hierarchy, the game manager and the audio manager are there as well. So very important that we execute the bootstrapper scene if we wish to run the game with all of the functionality that we need. So before finishing up, let me just take a few minutes just to point out where some of the important assets live inside our project view. So you can see if I select assets, the top level assets folder in our project view, you can see there's quite a few folders in there. To be honest, they're not folders you really have to worry about. You won't even see the Eureka folder, for example. That's a folder that comes down as part of the Asset Hunter package, which is just an asset that I bought from the asset store that allows me to strip out unused resources before I distribute the content to you guys. So you're not downloading lots and lots of stuff that you don't even need. Because often when you're working on a project, you drag in like gigabytes of stuff that you think you might need, and then you don't need it. And Asset Hunter on the asset store is a very cheap, very cool tool that strips all that stuff away. Very, very handy. There's some other folders here that you don't have to worry about, things like the standard assets, things like the replays and resources folder, which are really just used inside the editor, and also this compression lib folder, which contains a lib that is used by the replay system. It uses the sharp code compression library, sharp zip it's called, to make sure that the replays that are saved don't take up too much space. So they're all important files, but they're not really ones you want to investigate. The ones you need to investigate, which pertain to the core racing game, are in the Game Institute folder. So let's have a look what we've got in here. Well, first of all, we've got the scenes folder, which is where all of the scenes in the game live. Now, some of the scenes you see here may not be in the version that you get, because this is containing a lot of the GI Racing 1 scenes as well, which I'm keeping hanging around at the moment, even though they don't work, just so that when I upgrade them, it makes it a bit easier for me. I'd have to re-import them all again. But when I give the project to you guys, I strip out all the stuff that doesn't work yet. So what else have we got? We've got the models folder, is very important, and you can see this is where all of the actual 3D models that you get as part of this project, which is really, really cool, right? I mean, if we go into the cars folder, you can see there's a Super Holdens folder, and if we go into the Super Holden folder, you can see there is that cool car that is used by GI Racing, and by the time you watch this video, there may be many more cars here. And that VE1 Final Damages model, that is actually the car in its entirety. It contains the low-res interior, and it contains the car in all of its various damages. So that's why you're seeing a little bit of Z-fighting between the various damage model layers when I rotate it in the view, because in the preview window, all of the damage layers are actually active at the same time. So that's pretty much everything to do with the exterior of our car. We've also got a high-res interior that I made by essentially snapping out the interior from the low-res model and then just tessellating it more highly in 3ds Max so that the steering wheel didn't look all angular and the dashboard looked more curved. Then we have the car mirror surfaces. Now we'll talk about this in another video when I discuss from a high level how the rear view mirrors are implemented in GI Racing using render textures. But in order for me to assign them the mirror surfaces a unique texture, I actually snapped them out into a separate model. Now, I didn't really need to do that. I could have snapped them out as separate sub-objects within the VE1 Final Damages model. I already had the VE1 Final Damages model kind of really integrated into the game at that point. I didn't want to risk bringing something in that might bugger something up. So what I decided to do was load in the VE1 Damages model, snap up the two side mirrors and the rear view mirror surfaces, and then just save them as their own mesh. And because I haven't changed the scale or the local origin of the files, these things can all just be placed in the scene at the same location, and they will correctly marry up in the right positions. And of course, in the Super Holden folder, we also have all the textures that are used by the car. So if I go to the team textures, hey, here they all are. Cool stuff, hey? Oh yeah. And what's great about this is the guy that made all of these tracks and models that we use in GI Racing has allowed us to distribute them to you for educational purposes in this project. You will recall from GI Racing 1 that I couldn't actually give you any of the models or assets because I didn't have permission to do so, and it meant that I had to give you a really rubbish version of the project with all of the good assets taken out. It wasn't very inspiring, was it? This is much more inspiring because you're getting to see all the assets used in the real game and how we use them. Underneath the cars folder in the models folder, don't worry about primitives. I think that's just a cube that I made that allows you to put multiple materials on each face that I use for several UIs. Racetracks, of course, is very important. Here you're going to see all of the racetracks used by the game, and I don't want to go into too much detail on this yet, all the various different parts, but you can see if I select the Bathurst folder, we have several meshes that are used by Bathurst. We have the main one, which is Bathurst FBX, which is pretty much the entire scene, all the buildings, all the track, even the Sky Dome, which we don't actually use anymore. We use a skybox instead, but that's the base model there that comes in. And we also have a version here called Bathurst Track Only, which is everything stripped away except the racetrack. And you'll see in another video, possibly the next video, that this is used by the minimap. And when I do a video discussing the minimap and how it was implemented, that's when we're going to use this. Something else we also have as well, much like I snapped off the mirrors from the main car model and saved them as separate files, you'll see here that I've also, actually you can't see here because they don't really show up in the preview, but if I load in the Bathurst racetrack scene by going to my scenes folder and loading in Bathurst, you'll notice that as we go around the track there are literally dozens and dozens of these lampposts. Now, of course, these lampposts look pretty cool, but we need the actual lamps on the lampposts to light up at night. And when I first imported this model, they were all part of the same mesh, so I didn't have the ability to, for example, assign a white emissive material to the light bulb without the whole lamppost going light and emissive. So what I actually did was loaded the model into 3D Studio, and then I had to go around the entire level and I had to select the polygons that make up the bulb of every single lamppost in the level. That's right, folks. Grueling, huh? And then I snapped them off into a separate mesh, and I actually saved them off as a separate file as well. So when we look in the Bathurst Racetrack folder and we see this model here called Bathurst Lamps FBX, what this is basically a file that contains just the light bulbs of all of the lampposts in the scene as a single mesh. So it basically means that when I drop the Bathurst Lamps FBX into the scene at exactly the same location as the main Bathurst scene file, assuming they have the same scale and everything, they will all marry up, and the bulbs will correctly be positioned underneath the lampposts, but there will be a separate mesh. And like I said, that allows me to assign a different material, in my case an emissive material that I could turn on and off as I transition from day to night. Once again, I could have kept the lamps mesh as part of the main Bathurst FBX, but this was something I did much later in the day. I already had the Bathurst scene sort of integrated into the game. I didn't want to take any risks that I might alter the scaling of something, so I just brought it in, saved it off and brought it in as a separate mesh. Finally, you'll also see in the Bathurst folder, and I should say also that you'll see these different meshes for pretty much all of the racetracks. Okay, so when you look at Long Beach, there'll probably be a Long Beach collision mesh and a Long Beach lamps FBX or something like that, all for the same reasons. So this is a template really for how all of the assets will be laid out. If we select the Bathurst collision mesh, it looks like it's a really weird shaped mesh, right? But what it is it is a mesh that it has all of the side barriers that surround the track extruded high up into the air and everything else deleted. So the best thing is if I just show you how this works. So what I'll do is I will drag my Bathurst collision mesh into the scene, and I will make it a child of just the main Bathurst mesh. And you can see, assuming it's not scaled or offset differently from the parent mesh, what this mesh actually does is create a set of walls or barriers that pen in the entire racetrack. And this was created by loading the scene into 3ds Max, basically deleting everything in the scene except the barriers, and then extruding the top faces of those barriers really high up in the sky. And the reason I do this is if I just turn off that mesh for a moment. If we just added mesh colliders to the side barriers, they're not very high, and there is often a chance when you do this that during a crash a car might flip up into the air and actually come down over the other side of the barrier, and then the player would have no way of getting back onto the track. So I needed to make sure that the cars could never end up on the other side of their barriers, and that's what this separate collision mesh was for. Now obviously I've already got one in the scene, and here it is, you can see it with the colliders on, but I've just added another copy of that just to show you how I did this. So I basically created a mesh of the shape that I wanted that went around the entire racetrack, bounding in all of the sides of the track. And then what I did is, because the actual parent object contains nothing, it's all just a series of child objects, is I just added mesh colliders to all of the child objects. And then what I did, because this looks ugly obviously, and I didn't want these polygons to be rendered, is selecting all those child objects again, I just removed the mesh renderer, and then we're just left with the mesh colliders, which of course are invisible in the game window. So that's how we created those mesh colliders. Now I'm going to delete this because it's a duplicate. I've already got them in the scene. Here they are. But I just wanted to show you what they are and how they're used. Okay, so next up in the models folder, I think that's pretty much everything. If you go into the VFX folder, you'll find things like the particle systems that are used to spew out little mesh parts when the cars collide with each other. You'll see the rain particle system, which every scene contains and is turned on when the track manager is put into rainy weather mode. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, like I said, watch those GI Racing 1 videos, because I show how to set up the rain particle system and how it's controlled by the track manager. We have a folder for physics materials, which you can see here just contains the physics materials that are used by the objects. We don't have many here. Of course, another important one is the prefabs folder, which contains all of the prefabricated cars and things that I've set up. So you can see, if we go into the cars folder, there's two folders. There's the AI cars and the player cars, and if I select the AI cars, you can see there's a further grouping of cars based on the type of car model it is. I've only got one in this version, so that's just the Super Holden folder, and if you look into the Super Holden folder, you can see those are all of the AI cars. Now when you look in the preview window, they all look really weird, like something's gone wrong, because all you see is this great big orange and black disc. But don't worry, that is supposed to be there. In another video I'll explain what that is, but basically it's used by the minimap. But if you look underneath the counter, you can actually see the car, and that one there is a prefab of our Super Holden with the Vodafone textures on it. If I go down again, you can see there's the version, I think, with the Toll Holden team logos on it. And each one of these is just an AI car with different textures and configured differently. They have different, different engine torque curves, different handling, things like that. But all of these cars that are in the AI cars folder, they all have a very important script on them. They have the GI Race Driver AI controller script on them, and that controls that tells the system that this is to be controlled by an AI, not by a human controller. And if we look in the player cars folder underneath the cars subfolder and drill down into the Super Holden folder, you can see there are all of the prefabs of the player car. And player cars are just like AI cars, except instead of having a race driver AI controller script on them, they have a race driver controller script on them. And once again, they all look a bit weird and a bit funky when you look at them in the preview, because they have that big orange disc, which we'll explain later. But if you select them and rotate around, you can see that each one of these prefabs is our Super Holden car with different team textures on them, and they've been configured with different engine torque curves, different gear ratios, so they just handle differently. And these are the cars that are added to the game manager and that you as a player can unlock as your reputation grows, and different teams offer you a chance to go and race for them. But once again, everything I've just said will make perfect sense. You should know how to do all of this stuff and how these prefabs play a part in the overall game if you watch the GI Racing 1 videos. The scripts folder, of course, is of paramount importance. And in fact, that's the last folder that I'll focus on here. This contains all of the scripts kind of grouped by their functionality. So underneath the scripts folder, you can see we have the AI and controller system folder. And this contains some pretty biggies. It contains the AI controller, the script that drives the AI cars around the track. It contains the race driver controller, which is the script that allows the player to drive the car around the track. It's the script that communicates with whatever controller is being used. And it also has the track manager. And the track manager is, well, it's the most important script in the scene. And if we select the track manager and about her scene, you will see that this is an extensive tool that allows you to configure all of the race lines. It allows you to set up all these starting grid positions for the cars. It allows you to set the times of day, the visibility, whether it's raining or not, whether cars perform differently in each of those weather conditions. It allows you to specify which particle systems should be used for the various different weather conditions, as well as doing things such as setting the ambient color for each weather condition and time of day, setting the shadow intensity for each time of day, and track surface modifiers as well. Now, if you don't know what that means, like I said, watch the GI Racing 1 videos. All I'm going to talk about in this series of videos is just a few things that have been added to these tools that you can now benefit from. And some of the new features we've added, such as the minimap, the rear view mirror using render textures, and the ability to control blob shadows, and also the system that we had to put in place so that we could manage the vegetation system on the terrain, which isn't ideally suited from an efficiency standpoint to racing games. In the camera system folder, we've got the scripts to the camera manager itself, which is what contains all of the functionality of knowing when the scene should flip from one camera to the next. And in the subfolder called cameras, you can see we have all of the various different scripts that we can assign to the cameras in our scene to make those cameras behave in a certain way. So we can have certain cameras chase the car, certain cameras orbit the car, certain cameras be like an aerial cam top down, and things like that. What else we got in here? Yeah, in the editor folder we have the custom inspectors that are used for the track manager, the camera manager, and the game manager. So you can see if we select the track manager again in the scene, you can see that this isn't a standard Unity inspector. It has a lot of custom rendering. And this is all done by these scripts. So for the track manager, if you want to see how to write custom inspectors, you just need to open up the GI race track manager _ editor script, and you will see how a custom editor has been built that allows us to expose all of these tools and functionality in the inspector. And the same for the camera system and the game manager system as well. In the replay folder system, we have a pretty important script, and a script that is brand new to GI Racing 2, and that's the replay system. GI Racing 1 was actually given a replay system very late in the day, but this is going to be the first time that we really talk about it and document it when we get around to it. And in that file is the complete replay system, so very useful. Shows how we save the replay streams, how we load them from disk, how we play them back at a very low frame rate, but are able to interpolate between those frames so that we give the impression of smooth movement, and as a result create very small replay streams that get saved to disk. But in the scene game managers folder, we have lots of scripts here that are just used by various scenes throughout the game. Some of those scenes are just UI scenes. Pretty much every scene in Unity will somewhere in it have a scene manager that manages that scene. Even the bootstrapper has a scene manager, which is responsible for playing the movie texture and polling for when that movie texture it has completed playing and then loading in the next scene. So it's just the scene manager is what controls what happens when we enter that scene and what happens when we exit that scene. So I think that's pretty much everything of consequence without going into any sort of detail about any particular subsystems, which is what I'm going to do in the videos that follow. So thanks for listening, guys. Do enjoy poking around inside the project, loading in the scenes and having a look. And I think in the next video what I'm probably going to talk about is how I implemented the minimap feature in GI Racing 2. I'll see you then. Bye bye.